West England, again, western Scotland also. Generally speaking, many central and eastern parts staying overcast. The odd light shower, but most places dry. The wind's a little lighter, but if anything, it will be a colder day tomorrow. Temperatures for many struggling at just 4 or 5 Celsius. Bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway, with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
So it's PMQs this morning. We are getting absolutely battered by you lot at home for the fact that we slightly got the giggles at the woman who lost Piglet the Chihuahua. She's lost him nearly a year ago. She spent £22,000 on trying to find him. Janet says your reaction will really damage that woman. Well, I hope not. We didn't mean to be mean. She'll be so hurt and upset. She's already hurt and upset, let's be honest. And somebody here, Andrew, said, oh, here we go. Sandra says, I hope Andrew's cats don't go missing. Would he laugh then?
No, I wouldn't, but I wouldn't spend £22,000 crowdfunding to find them.
And a year later, still looking?
By then, I'd waited 6 months and got another cat.
Well, Carol says, absolutely disgusted with you both. Don't ever call yourselves professional journalists. You're disgraceful. Laughing at that lady's lost pet. We're not, just to be clear, we weren't laughing at her, and it's not nice for somebody to be in distress like that. I think it was the combination of this cute little Chihuahua.
Yeah.
I like to think, and do you know what it is as well? I don't want to see that woman in that much pain, and that was why my question was, how long are you going to stay in this distressed state for?
She's going to look forever.
She'll live forever? I don't want her to live a life that sad. Come on.
Now, it's PMQs. Gloria and Tom will be in charge there. The big issue today will be, what would the big issue be? Well, the Tories could go on the WhatsApp groups, which have caused resignation the sacking of the Labour minister, Andrew Gwynn, the suspension of another Labour MP and the suspension of 10 Labour councillors. The second MP who was suspended was joking, amongst other things, about the type of clothes Orthodox Jewish people wear.
Oh, blimey. And maybe they'll talk about this new borders watchdog living in Finland.
Yeah.
There might be a point or two to be earned with that.
Difficult to do your job in Finland if you're the borders watchdog.
And also this right to die, assisted dying bill, is still...
Yeah, the Prime Minister will kick
changed
it into touch because, of course, it's a backbench bill. But, of course, it's a dramatic change that Kim Leadbeater, who had assured MPs on 6 occasions that there would be 2 doctors and a serving High Court judge would decide whether the assisted dying could happen. She's changed it halfway through. The judge goes, and it will be a panel of experts, including, I don't wish to be unkind about social workers, including social workers. Why are they experts? What are they experts about?
Not that.
The point about the judge was to have somebody there who could decide whether...
objectively.
And whether the older person or the sick person was being coerced, because that is a really important issue.
And would anybody on either side of the House actually dare mentioning Margaret Thatcher's name on an anniversary week?
Wouldn't it be extraordinary if they don't? If a Tory doesn't stand, with the Prime Minister speaking now, so we'll go straight to the Commons now.
Justice. We also announced a further £350 million to get Britain building and deliver 1.5 million new homes our country desperately needs, including more affordable homes. We've slashed red tape that holds businesses and working people back, creating 10,000 more apprentices. This morning I have meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Imran Hussain. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was proud to have played my part in helping draft what has now become the Employment Rights Bill. A new poll shows 3/4 of the British public back the stronger rights for workers in the bill, including better sick pay. Yet that lot over there, the Tories and Reform, disgracefully voted against it. In fact, the leader of the opposition doesn't even believe in maternity pay or the living wage. Mr. Speaker, our statutory sick pay is ranked one of the lowest in Europe. It needs to be brought in line with the living wage. So will the Prime Minister back my campaign to strengthen this bill further so sick pay is at the level that finally stops punishing workers for being sick?
Mr. Speaker, our plan for change delivers the biggest upgrade in workers' rights in a generation to our employment rights bill. Ending exploitative zero-hour contracts, ending the scandal of fire and rehire, extending statutory sick pay to 1.3 million employees. Of course, that's on top of the pay rise for 3 million of the lowest paid. I would have thought the Leader of the Opposition might actually sort of support day one protection employment rights, given where she's going, but she thinks maternity leave is excessive. Our plan is pro-worker and pro-growth.
Yeah. Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Beno.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative government established the Ukraine Family Scheme, and in total, over 200,000 Ukrainians, mostly women, children and the elderly, have found sanctuary in the UK from Putin's war. However, a family of 6 from Gaza have applied to live in Britain using this scheme, and a judge has now ruled in their favour. This is not what the scheme was designed to do. This decision is completely wrong. It cannot be allowed to stand. Is the government planning to appeal on any points of law? And if so, which ones?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I do not agree with the decision. She's right. It's the wrong decision. She hasn't quite done her homework because the decision in question was taken under the last government, according to the legal framework of the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. It should be Parliament that makes the rules on immigration. It should be the government that makes the policy. That is the principle, and the Home Secretary is already looking at the legal loophole which we need to close in this particular case.
Mr. Speaker, he did not answer the question. If he plans to appeal, then the appeal may be unsuccessful and the law will need to be changed. And if he does not appeal, the law definitely will need to be changed. He talks about a decision made under the last government. It was not made by the last government, it was made by the courts. The issue we are discussing today is about judicial decisions. We cannot be in a situation where we allow enormous numbers of people to exploit our laws in this way. There are millions of people all around the world in terrible situations. We cannot help them all, and we certainly cannot bring them all here. Will he commit to bringing forward that new legislation or amending his borders bill?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already said the Home Secretary has already got a team working on closing this loophole. We don't need to wait for that. We're getting on with that because we're taking control. They lost control of immigration. We had nearly 1 million people come into this country, had an open borders experiment. On a Monday of this week, they voted against increased powers to deal with those that are running the vile trade of people smuggling. Same old Tories, open borders, empty promises.
Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister was on top of his brief, perhaps he'd be able to answer some questions. Given this crazy decision and so many others, new legislation is needed to clarify the right to a family life in Article 8. I'm not talking about what he just said. I know Labour MPs don't understand much of what they're saying, but the Prime Minister literally wrote a book on the European Convention on Human Rights. This is a situation where we need to put our national interest before the ECHR. Does he agree that we should legislate even if lawyers warn that this might be incompatible with human rights law?
She complains about scripted answers and questions. Her script doesn't allow her to listen to the answer.
Prime Minister.
She asked me if we're going to change the law and close the loophole in question 1. I said yes. She asked me again in question 2, and I said yes. She asked me again in question 3. It's still yes.
Mr. Speaker, he didn't listen to question 1. I asked if he would appeal the decision. He did not answer that. He's not listening. He's too busy defending the international human rights law framework. Mr. Speaker, this case has arisen because a Palestinian came to the UK from Gaza in 2007. He is now a British citizen. This is precisely why we need to break the conveyor belt from arriving in the UK to acquiring indefinite leave to remain and then a British passport, and now a right to bring 6 family members here as well. Just last week, the Prime Minister bizarrely claimed that a British passport was not a pull factor for those coming to the UK. Will he now support our plans to toughen the process on indefinite leave to remain and make getting a British passport a privilege, not a right?
Prime Minister. Speaker, they presided over record high levels of immigration. Reached nearly 1 million. It was a one-nation experiment in open borders. And she was the cheerleader. She was the one campaigning for more people to come and thanking her own side when they thwarted her campaign. So before she lectures us, I think she needs to reflect on her own record here.
Mr. Speaker, he is the Prime Minister now. The people out there want to know what he is going to do about the situation. He needs to spend less time whining about the last government and do his job. I thought, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister and I both agreed that Israel had a right to defend herself. Yet the judge in this case noted that the family were facing a humanitarian crisis, and I quote, as a consequence of the Israeli government's indiscriminate attempts to eliminate Hamas, and government lawyers accepted this. Is the Prime Minister allowing lawyers to change the position on Israel? And was this because of advice from the Attorney General? And if not, why on earth did government lawyers accept the argument that Israeli actions were indiscriminate?
Prime Minister. They put the complete opposite opposite argument. She talks about on top of her breath. She has no idea what she's talking about. I'll tell her again. We need to change the law. That's why the Home Secretary is already closing the gap. I know the script doesn't allow any adaptation, but this is getting tedious.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has not read the judgment. I suggest that he does. There are very serious questions now. There are very serious questions now being asked about the Attorney General, the Prime Minister's personal friend and donor. Even Labour ministers are concerned. One Labour peer, Lord Glassman, has called him the absolute archetype of an arrogant progressive fool. If we are serious about protecting our borders, we need to make sure we appoint people who believe in our country and everything we stand for. It is not clear the Attorney General does. The government is now recruiting a new Chief Inspector of Borders who lives in Finland and wants to work from home. This is not serious. Why should the British public put up with this?
The individual in question was appointed in 2019 by the last government to a senior position. He then worked for 5 years from Finland. We've changed that, and he's going to be working from the United Kingdom full-time. Finland under them. And she talks about the Attorney General. She sat round the cabinet table with an attorney who was later sacked for breaching national security.
Charlotte Littles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Long-standing traders in the CPS Centre in Colchester were devastated to receive eviction notices, giving them just 28 days to vacate, entirely out of the blue and under spurious pretexts by the new owner, shell company Shivat Hananim Capital. So far, the owner and their legal representatives have failed to hear tenants' concerns and mine and to negotiate a way forward. So does the Prime Minister share my concerns at this situation, and will he set out our plans to protect independent businesses which are at the heart of our high street and communities?
Prime Minister.
Well, thank her for raising this, which is obviously a real concern to businesses in her constituency. We do, Mr. Speaker, expect landlords to meet their obligations to make buildings safe, and we support robust enforcement action from the regulators if they fail to do so. I will make sure that she gets a meeting with the Minister to discuss what steps can be taken in the particular case to support the businesses that her constituents rely on.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 80 years ago this week, the Allies began a pincer movement against German forces between the Ruhr and the Rhine. British and Canadian troops attacked from the north, Americans from the south. British, Canadian and American soldiers fighting shoulder to defeat fascists. 80 years on, President Trump seems to have forgotten all this. His tariffs against steel and aluminium will hit Canada the hardest and will also hit jobs and the cost of living in our country. So in reminding President Trump who America's true and long-standing friends and allies really are, will the Prime Minister also prepare a plan for tariffs in return, starting with tariffs on American electric cars?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he's right to reference our history in the 80-year anniversary. Of course, we were fighting alongside the Americans, and that is amongst the reasons we have a special relationship. British steel is an essential part of our heartlands, and we will not abandon our skilled workforce. And it needs a level-headed assessment of the implications, which is what we're going through at the moment. But we will always put our national interest first and steelworkers first.
Sir Ed Davey. Thank the Prime Minister for that reply. But it seems to me the way President Trump and his ally Musk are operating, they do need to hear strong measures and words from even their allies. And moving on to Ukraine, Mr. Speaker. If Ukraine is forced to surrender its own sovereign territory to Russia, it will be the greatest betrayal of a European ally since Poland in 1945. But President Trump says Ukraine may end up Russian, and he wants American money back. I think we all fear where this could end, and the dangerous implications for our defence and our security. So can the Prime Minister reassure this House that he and other European leaders have given sufficient support to President Zelensky so that he can't be bullied by Trump and Putin into accepting a deal that will effectively hand victory to Russia?
Prime Minister.
As he knows, I met President Zelensky in Kyiv just a few weeks ago at my 8th meeting. The position since the outbreak of this conflict has been a united position across the House of supporting Ukraine, and I was able to reiterate my position, which is we must put Ukraine in the strongest possible position. That matters now just as much as it mattered at the beginning of this conflict, the strongest possible position, and I did discuss with him what more we can do, what more our allies can do to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position.
Kim Ledbeat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 years ago, from the benches opposite, I published my Healthy Britain report, recommending a cross-departmental approach to improving health and wellbeing. Now that we're in government, I'm delighted that ministers have hit the ground running, because running is obviously very healthy for you. So will the Prime Minister confirm that last week's announcement of an increase to the public health grants, which will help local services focus more on prevention and early intervention, is just the start of a long-term strategy that will make Britain healthier, happier and more productive, reduce pressure on the NHS and promote growth?
Well, I thank her for highlighting the important role that local communities play in supporting healthy lifestyles. I'm delighted, Mr. Speaker, we're providing almost £4 billion for the local health services that people rely on, and that's things like health visitors, stop smoking services and drug abuse treatments. I'll make sure that she meets the relevant minister to discuss.
Saoirse Eastwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, I get it. Nobody wants to get into a trade war. But, you know, unlike Peter Mandelson, sometimes you've got to stand up for what you believe in. My friends here in the DUP have learnt nothing from their mistake of backing Brexit and think that tariffs are a laughing matter. No. But would you agree with me that actually we need to stand up for ourselves, we need to back our workers, we need to back our businesses, not just in Lagan Valley but indeed across the UK?
Well, yes, of course. The US and the UK share a strong and balanced trading relationship. We invest hugely in each other's economies, and we will continue to work closely with President Trump to boost growth and to create jobs. And I reassure her we will always act in the best interests of businesses and working people across the whole of the United Kingdom, including, of course, Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was baffled on Monday that, given the chance to support legislation backed by the National Crime Agency to crack down on criminal smuggler gangs and secure our borders, the parties opposite, the Conservatives and Reform, linked arms in the voting lobby to vote against it. The Conservatives spent 3 years and £700 million on their ludicrous Rwanda scheme and saw 4 volunteers returned. Does the Prime Minister agree with me? There is only one party that is serious about repairing our broken immigration system.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and let me remind them what they voted against earlier this week in our Borders Bill. They voted against, that's Reform and the Tories, they voted against making it an offence to organise the buying, selling and transport of small boats, against making it an offence to endanger lives at sea, against and powers to arrest suspected people smugglers before the smuggling takes place. They voted against. They voted for open borders, both of them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Prime Minister gave yet another threadbare excuse for why he and his North London lawyer friends are giving away the Chagos Islands. Mr. Speaker, this is his decision, and he must own it. More importantly, he can't tell us, the British taxpayer, how much this is going to cost. Is it 9 billion? Is it 18 billion? Is it 52 billion? The Times have called this botched deal insane. Members of his own cabinet reportedly think it's impossible to understand, and one of his own MPs think it's the worst thing the Labour Party have ever done. So could the Prime Minister tell us which word he thinks best describes this deal?
Mr. Speaker, I set out the position in relation to the Chagos Islands last week. I also offered the Leader of the Opposition a briefing on this, a high-level briefing. She still hasn't taken me up on that briefing. There are asking questions without wanting to know the facts. It's extraordinary. Mr. Speaker, someone who wants to be Prime Minister does not want to know the facts, even when she's offered a high-level briefing. He'd be better informed if she took me up on the offer of a briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will, I'm sure, want to congratulate Newcastle United on reaching the League Cup final after Arsenal's exit. But will he also, in what is National Apprentice Week, will he also congratulate the 600 apprentices learning trades from welding to quantity surveying as part of the Tyne Bridge restoration programme? And whilst I know he can't confirm bridging the funding gap left by the Tories, will he confirm that he is looking forward to seeing the Tyne Bridge restored in time for its 100th birthday in 2028?
Well, look, I'm going to struggle to sound delighted with the results of that particular football match, but look, it will be a special day for Newcastle fans. But the Tyne Bridge is an iconic North East landmark, and I congratulate the apprentices who are helping to restore this vital piece of infrastructure. As usual, the Tories made empty promises that they had no intention of keeping, including £2.9 billion worth of transport commitments that were never funded. We will look at the capital projects around the spending review and let her know as soon as we can.
Liz Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents, Peter and Maureen, have been married for 70 years. Peter is 93, and for the past few weeks he has been stuck on a hospital ward, waiting to go home because a care package hasn't been arranged. Peter is missing home and missing Maureen. So will the Prime Minister reassure my constituents that the social care crisis will be tackled this year?
Well, can I thank her for raising this issue and the particular case of her constituents? And I also know this is deeply personal to her, and if I may, I extend my deepest sympathies to her and her family for their loss. We have taken immediate action on social care, already delivered £3.7 billion of additional investment, working on the first ever fair pay agreement for the sector and, of course, boosting the carers allowance. I invite her and everybody to work with the House on the longer-term reform that we need. Thank you.
Julie Mims.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. James Rennie is an outstanding specialist school in the heart of my Carlisle constituency. Having converted every spare corner into classrooms, exceeded its published admissions numbers, and already having 43 applications known for this September, it is literally bursting at the seams. It cannot expand any further, and what is clearly needed is a new specialist school for North Cumbria. What assurances can the Prime Minister give my constituents that his government will put children before ideology and allow local authorities to tackle the shortage in SEND provision?
Well, I thank her for raising this vital issue. It's not the first time it's come up. We are supporting mainstream schools to increase SEND expertise whilst also establishing dedicated SEND units. Because we need to make sure that special schools also can cater for those with the most complex needs. So we're working on this. It's come up time and again, but we are doing that vital initial steps.
Sabine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dorothy House is an amazing hospice that supports terminally ill people in Frumeney, Somerset and their families, including my good friend Lisa. Next year, Dorothy House will be looking forward to celebrating 50 years of service, but they will also be facing an additional cost of £422,000 thanks to increases in employers' national insurance. Will the Prime Minister commit to meeting with me and representatives of the hospice sector to hear first-hand the impact of NICs and to work with them to find a solution?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, everyone deserves high quality and compassionate end-of-life care. The honourable member knows we inherited a £22 billion black hole in our public finances. That's why we took the difficult but right decisions to invest in our public services. I do recognise the pressure that hospices are facing, and that's why we invested £100 million into hospitals with an additional £26 million to support children and young people's hospices. And I will make sure she gets a meeting with the relevant minister.
John Hodge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A significant part of the dreadful legacy left by the previous Conservative government is a chronic underfunding of transport infrastructure, especially in the North East, as we've just heard from my honourable friend. So does the Prime Minister agree with me and the North East Mayor Kim McGuinness that redevelopment of the Leamside line, the disused Leamside line, that would reconnect Gateshead with Durham North, and increasing the capacity on the East Coast Main Line would bring the metro, help bring the metro to Washington in my constituency, and would bring much needed jobs, growth and opportunities to my region?
Well, I thank her, and both she and the North East Mayor are dedicated campaigners on this issue. The party opposite left us a host of unfunded promises, and public transport is in dire condition. Expanding the metro network has huge potential to drive growth and unlock new housing. I'm pleased that progress is being made on the business case.
Second Batty.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this week we learned that the Prime Minister's close friend, the Attorney General, has in the past advised Caribbean nations on seeking trillions of pounds in reparations. He's been a key player in the surrender of the Chagos Islands and the related fiasco there, which will cost the taxpayers up to £18 billion, and has even advised Jerry Adams, who is standing in line to get compensation from the British government in Northern Ireland legacy payments, the quantum of which could cost up to £2.7 billion. Given the Attorney General's track record, does the Prime Minister have faith in his motives, and does he have confidence that his best friend represents good value for the British taxpayer?
Mr. Speaker, we've long had the principle that everybody's entitled to legal representation in this country. That means that lawyers don't necessarily agree with their client. Now, the Conservative Party used to believe in that principle. If they now disagree with that principle, they should go and see the victims of very serious crime, including sexual crime, and tell them that under their provisions, the lawyer who disagreed with the perpetrator wouldn't be able to represent them, meaning that victims will be cross-examined by perpetrators because lawyers disagree with the perpetrator. That's never been the Conservative Party position. If it is now, they should say so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allergy School, launched just this week by the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, is a free programme to support children with food allergies. Allergic disease is a growing issue in this country, with over 20 million people in the UK being affected. For this reason, it has never been more important for us to have a national allergy strategy and an allergy czar to drive and coordinate that action. Will the Prime Minister join me in welcoming this programme, and will he meet with me and the Foundation to talk about how we can work together to drive this issue forward?
Well, I thank her for raising this really important issue, because hospital admissions for allergies have risen sharply, particularly in the last 2 decades. I do welcome the work being carried out by the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation. We will respond to the recommendations of the National Allergy Strategy Group in due course, and I'll make sure she gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Oxfordshire constituency of Didcot and Wantage has seen a 35% population increase in the last 20 years. My constituents recognise the need for affordable housing, but the current planning system isn't delivering the GP surgeries, dentists and transport options that they need. Will the Prime Minister restore faith in the planning system and, as well as focusing on housing numbers, deliver the local targets for health services and wider infrastructure that growing communities need?
Well, thank you for his question. We are, of course, delivering the 1.5 million homes, but we're creating communities as well for the future, and so he's right that that must include good schools, GPs and reliable transport links. That's what makes a good community. And just today, Mr. Speaker, we announced an additional £350 million to deliver more affordable homes so more people can realise the dream of home ownership.
Toby Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week is National Apprenticeship Week. As co-chair of the APPG for Apprenticeship, I can tell the Prime Minister that employers are very pleased to see the announcements this week that will make a real difference both in terms of the completion rate and the flexibility around apprenticeships. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that schools should be promoting apprenticeship alongside A-levels and other options? And can he tell us what more he's going to do to support more young people to get into an apprenticeship?
I'm very pleased that he's raised this issue and that we'll be able to give employers more flexibility over maths and English requirements. This is really important, Mr. Speaker. There are very many young people who didn't get the maths qualification they wanted at the time, but are very well suited for the future, want to play their part, and now they can get apprenticeships under the changes that we've made. And that's 10,000 extra apprenticeships. This is delivering for them, giving them a chance for the future to contributing, of course, to our economy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Farming Minister told a conference of farmers that farming is not high in the pecking order for this government. Given the heartless family farm tax, is his minister correct? Yes or no?
Farming's top of the agenda as far as I'm concerned. That's why we put £5 billion to support farmers in the budget. They failed to spend £300 million on their watch on farming, and we set out our roadmap, which has been welcomed by the NFU, as she very well knows. It was described as long overdue. I wonder who didn't do it before.
Mr. Jewess, I'm sure you don't want to be leaving today. It's not the best day. Right. Natasha Irons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a graduate of the Croydon Youth Philharmonic Orchestra, the Prime Minister will know that youth services can broaden a young person's horizons beyond what they could ever imagine. But with national spending on youth services seeing a 73% decline since 2010, can the Prime Minister outline how this government will bring youth services back into our communities? Will he look at giving them the statutory protections they deserve? And will he visit Croydon East to see firsthand the vital role these services play in my constituency?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my days in the Croydon Youth Philharmonic Orchestra were a long time ago now. But we do fully recognise the importance of youth services to help young people save lives and live safe and healthy lives. We've been developing our plans for the new National Youth Strategy to bring power back to young people and help every young person realise their potential.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Every 22 minutes, a child in this country loses a parent or a loved one. That's 40,000 children every year facing a trauma which many of us here know can last a lifetime. Charities such as Winston's Wish do a fantastic job of providing support for young people, particularly when schools are closed or there's no one else to turn to. But at the moment, there's no simple way of the children knowing where the charities are or the charities being able to contact the children. So will the government back my private member's bill this summer to do just that? And would the Prime Minister meet me to discuss how we make sure that another generation of children does not have to face this trauma?
Well, can I thank her for her ongoing work and campaign on this important issue. The Cross-Government Bereavement Group continues to look at how we can improve access to the support that children and young people need at these difficult times. And of course I'll make sure that she gets the meeting that she wants with the Minister to discuss this further.
David Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday marks the 20th anniversary of the launch of the Make Poverty History campaign, and a fantastic speech for all of us that were there, delivered by the late great Mandiba. That campaign inspired a generation of campaigners and a great Labour government to deliver unprecedented action to tackle global poverty, lifting millions out of poverty. Will the Prime Minister join me in paying tribute to some of those campaigners and commit to doing all he can to ensure that Britain is playing its full part in helping eradicate global poverty today?
It's a really important issue. We do pay tribute, and of course we continue to play our full part.
Alex Bloor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Basingstoke Hospital, used by half of my constituency of North East Hampshire, has had its rebuild delayed by 15 years, despite no ministerial visit to see the worsening conditions there. The cost of maintaining the hospital for those 15 years is estimated to be almost as much as the rebuild itself. So can the Prime Minister explain the logic of making taxpayers pay twice?
Mr. Speaker, her constituents are right to be frustrated about the empty, unfunded promises that were left behind by the Conservatives, a point made by her and, of course, by the Labour MP for Basingstoke. Under the previous government's plan, a new hospital in Basingstoke would simply not have been delivered because it was unfunded. It was a promise without anything behind it. We've put in place a funded deliverable plan which will see the hospital built, and we'll work closely with the Trust to ensure that it is.
Dr. Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's devolution plans are a welcome progressive development to shift power and resources from Whitehall to our communities. But there are, of course, discussions now around the process and realisation of benefits for our communities. So can the Prime Minister assure my residents in Worthing West, and indeed all constituencies starting priority devolution programmes, that Sussex devolution will give us meaningful control over our local priorities, including housing, transport and social care?
Minister. Well, I thank her for raising devolution, which will see her constituents in Sussex get meaningful control over local priorities. The devolution priority programme, Mr. Speaker, will see a wave of mayors elected next year, including in Sussex, and I believe that those with skin in the game make the best decisions about their communities.
Final question, Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will be well aware of the Global Vaccination Fund, Gavi, one of the United Kingdom's great success stories. It's vaccinated from deadly diseases over 1 billion children under 5. It presents real value for money to British taxpayers, and over 80% of our constituents support it. Will he give the House today an undertaking that Britain will continue this leadership and make a decisive pledge at next month's replenishment conference?
Well, I'm grateful. This is a really important issue. As he rightly points out, I've long supported it and will continue to support and share details with him just as soon as I can. But it's important, have supported it, will continue to do so. Thank you.
Right, that completes Minister's questions.
That was Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer taking questions from MPs in the House of Commons. Now we're going to cross live to Westminster now because our political editor Chris Hope has been in that chamber, watching it, smelling it, feeling it, seeing all the bits that we can't see on the telly. So Chris Hope, what we want to know from you is what were the 3 main takeaways that you got from that exchange?
Hi, Gloria. Yeah, I mean, I call that 6-0 to Keir Starmer. We had 6 questions there from Kevin Badenoch, and I'm afraid to say the PM will wipe the floor with the Tory leader. Quite what GBNews viewers and listeners make it of it, you'll be disclosing to the panel shortly. But I thought there were 3 takeaways from there. We heard Keir Starmer say he's going to close this loophole, which apparently might allow Gazans to settle in the UK under the Ukraine settlement scheme. We'll close that, and he's clearly made clear that the government will change the law to close that loophole after that High Court ruling. Kevin Badenoch heard that and kept asking the same question, didn't change tack, didn't have a plan B in her line of attack on Sir Keir Starmer. And the final question, you thought might be an easy one, a work-from-home question. John Tuckett, 73, of course, he's now this new borders watchdog. He's a resident or based in Finland. Well, the PM had to come back on that. He's doing it for 5 years under a Tory government. And guess what? As of today, he's based in the UK. Clearly, they saw the front page of the Daily Mail today, and Number 10 acted. Again, another win for Sir Keir Starmer. And finally, on the issue of borders, because the Tories and Reform UK, don't forget, voted against the border plan on Monday, that allows Sir Keir Starmer to say, even our attempt to stop illegal migration, you are trying to frustrate it. It's an old trick that both parties use against each other. Again, another win for Sir Keir Starmer. I'm afraid to say she had a bad one, Kevin Badenoch.
Very much, Christopher Hope, live there from Westminster Hall. Now, in the studio here, just across the other side of Westminster, the other side of Parliament Square, we're joined by the Labour MP for Chipping Barnet, Dan Tomlinson, and the co-chairman of the Conservative Party, Nigel Huddleston. Nigel, we've got to firstly throw that analysis right at you. Christopher Hope says your leader lost.
Well, I disagree, because what I heard was Keir Starmer not answer the question about whether he would appeal this case. Now, throwing stuff into, oh, we'll change the law, great, that's going to take years. There's an immediate issue and a problem here. And he did not answer the question whether he would appeal. And that's what Kemi kept going back for. And she didn't get an answer. So I don't blame her for going back. She didn't get an answer to that. It also raises the broader issue here of judicial overstretch, which is something that Kemi's been talking about for a long period of time. So I'm not surprised she went on that, because this is a big issue.
That's a fair point, because Dan Tomlinson, she did ask about an appeal. Will an appeal be made in this egregious case? And Keir Starmer didn't answer. He kept saying he answered her, but he didn't give an answer on that.
It did sort of feel like that the leader of the opposition was doing a PMQs against herself. This was a decision, the Prime Minister said, that the previous government made. They didn't appeal against the decision. And then she raised this question about the man who's been working in Finland. Again, 5 years he'd been working in Finland, working from home. Under this government, that situation has changed. I know there's not lots of money in Conservative headquarters at the moment, but I do think they should invest a bit more time in research and thinking about the questions that they're going to be asking.
Well, talking about questions, you have been sending some fantastic ones, and of course, as you know, it's all about your questions, not ours. So without further ado, I am going to stick with our Labour representative and ask you Joe from Somerset's question. All illegal entry into the UK is a crime. No one coming this way should get British citizenship. They've broken the law. They're deportable with no appeal. Well, that couldn't be clearer. That's what Joe thinks. Is it more complicated than that, or do you agree with Joe?
Well, we've been really clear that we need to make sure we find a way to improve our border security. That's definitely a big problem that I heard about on the doorsteps in my constituency in North London at the last election. There's too many people who are being exploited by criminal gangs and crossing over on the small boats. We had a bill that was before Parliament this week that would have made it more difficult for that to happen. It would have gone a good way in towards tackling this problem. And the Conservatives and Reform voted against making it more difficult, for example, the bill would have made it illegal for these people smugglers to be involved in the buying and selling of boats or things that make it easier for people to cross the channel. We're trying very hard to push on these issues to make sure we can make progress, because we understand that this government has to make progress where previous governments haven't.
The bill does also repeal some key elements of the Conservative government's Illegal Migration Act. Nigel, is that why the Conservatives voted against it?
Well, yes, because, I mean, this takes away the deterrent. That's the whole point. You are eliminating the deterrent aspects that we brought in. And you're not replacing, you're tinkering around at the edges. That will not solve the problem, which is the reason why boat crossings have gone up 30% since you've been in power. There is no deterrent anymore. You've taken that away. So the amendment that Kemi put in this week, which was supported then by all Conservative MPs, and Reform followed us in this, that was to bring this back. You know, so this bill is full of holes, and you know it.
On the point of the deterrent, we have deported 19,000 people since we took office, people that shouldn't be here in this country, that don't have a right to be here. That's the highest it has been, I think, in half a decade. The last government were parading around with what I think was a sham, really, the Rwanda scheme. It wasn't a workable scheme.
It was already working.
It was an incredibly
expensive scheme. Because if you talk to people in Ireland, they said they could see people were going to Ireland because it was deterring
before
them.
the election were up significantly on 2023. If the Rwanda scheme was a deterrent, you would have thought they'd have come down. We've been taking the steps needed to get people who shouldn't be in this country out of this country so that we can have that deterrent effect. And we're also securing borders with the Balkan states, with other countries.
No, it's all talk. You're not dealing with the problem. Your own advisors have told you, unless you have a deterrent, this will not work, and you're taking away the deterrent
Do you not think that putting 19,000 people on a plane who shouldn't be here is a deterrent?
Well, it's a good job, because those are exactly the agreements that we put in place. Some of the things we support because you're implementing and executing the things that we put in place when we were in power, including some of the return agreements. That's why we've had the success on Albania and so on. But in terms of a deterrent, it's now non-existent. That is Labour's strategy. Kemi has been really clear. It's the reason why she's been making the announcements on policy. We got things wrong when we're in government. We admit that. We're under new leadership now. Things are changing.
I suppose there is one point here, which is that it's true deportations have been rising under this government, and we've seen some very visual evidence of that. But as long as there is no safe third country in which to deport people who come from non-safe countries, all of the deportations we're seeing now are to countries that are safe. What happens if someone crosses on a small boat from somewhere like Afghanistan or Iran? You can't send them back to those countries. We don't have deals with those countries. Where do they go if we don't have a Rwanda option?
I think this is a difficult question. This sort of thing is one of the things that the government will be considering. We know that we need to continue making progress on the issue of border security. And, you know, let me just tell you a story. I used to know a woman who came here on a small boat from Iran. She had, I won't go into the details, but a horrendous time in Iran, was treated appallingly. We couldn't send her back to Iran given that situation. So we do have to find a way to get through this very knotty problem, but we have to make sure we protect our borders and make sure we look after people who are in desperate need, who do need to be able to have somewhere safe and secure to live, where they and their family are not going to be treated totally unacceptably.
But this is the problem, though. If they were already in France and coming over on a boat, they were already somewhere safe. This is the point that Labour don't seem to get. That's what's getting people angry. Therefore, coming over on the boats is illegal. And they're moving from a safe country already.
But this happened under your watch as well.
And I say, look, let's be absolutely clear. You know, this is the refreshing honesty that you are getting from Kemi. You know, we did get things wrong, but look, I don't think anybody can be any doubt. We were aggressively pursuing Rwanda, and again, lefty courts and so on. It did work. Elements of it were working already.
You know that it didn't work.
Well, you've thrown it all out now because I don't know what your strategy is.
OK. Dan, I just want to ask you a wider question about this, about a debate that's going on in your party. It's quite clear when Labour won a lot of those red wall seats back that they lost at the last election. You can sense it. You can see from the clampdown, the talk on immigration, the ads in sort of reform colours from the Labour Party this week, that they are making a concerted effort to keep or win back those people in those areas who supported them last time. Now, you mentioned that you're an MP in North London. Because the debate that's happening is that if the Labour Party go too far in winning back those people who are attracted by reform, then they alienate some of your voters who may be tempted by the Greens or the Liberal Democrats. Does that worry you?
No, because I think that it is a mainstream view in this country shared by millions and millions of people, and definitely shared by me and members of the Parliamentary Labour Party and the Prime Minister, that we have to tackle the issue of migration in this country. 1 million people coming net the year before last. I think 750,000 the year just gone. That's too high. That doesn't work for our infrastructure. It doesn't work for our public services, and we have to bring that down. And also, there's a moral case to be made that a country and its borders should be secure. And there are many people in my constituency and people in constituencies across the country that get that. That's why it's a serious issue. It's one that we know we need to make progress on, and I'm sure there'll be more to come in the months and years ahead on it.
OK. Well, this is, of course, a day in which migration isn't the only show in town. The government is talking about growth. There's an announcement on Heathrow today, and there are some big questions over whether or not the economy will get growing. Anthony has written in on this question, asking what will Starmer say when the economy goes into recession, unemployment increases to 5% or more due to tax and employment policies. Anthony seems to be very down about the possibility and the future of the UK. Do you agree with his assessment, Nigel?
Well, unfortunately so, and I get no joy in saying that, because Labour's decisions, that disastrous budget, is having an impact right across the country, including in my own constituency, where businesses are telling me, as a direct result of decisions by Labour, particularly the national insurance increases, the taking away the reliefs on business rates and so on, retail, hospitality and leisure in particular is really struggling. And this is before the national insurance changes have even been brought in. So I'm really worried. But I think Labour will do in this government is what they always do. They increase unemployment. There is not a Labour government that has not increased unemployment during their time in office.
Dan Tomlinson, that budget is going to screw the economy. That's what Anthony says. Nigel Huddleston from the Conservatives agrees. Put up your best defence if you can.
We had to make decisions last year to set the public finances right for the long term. The Conservatives haven't come forward with proposals as to how they would raise revenue instead to fund the NHS. I know. Let me make my point. I know from talking to people in my constituency that the fact that waiting lists have hit record highs, it's impossible to see your GP or a dentist, is something that people want to change. And we had to make those decisions on tax and spending last time to set the public services on a better course. And this year, over and again, we've seen from the Chancellor and from the government lots of very big, bold, important decisions to get private sector investment up in this country. In 24 of the last 30 years, the rate of investment in this country was lower than in every other G7 economy. And if you live off your past rather than build for the future, your country just gets poorer and poorer and poorer, and people's living standards end up stagnating as they have done. We've got to turn that around. We've got to build things again in this country and be the country that we once were, that was at the forefront, that was innovating.
How can you follow the rhetoric with action? Because it's very, very bold rhetoric that we're hearing from you and from the Chancellor. But in the last quarter, UK GDP went down, not up.
We have to do better. We have to do better when it comes to GDP. And lots of the decisions we've been taking are for the long-term health of our country, long-term investments that politicians have ducked and dived away from. There's a video of Nick Clegg online, I think from 2010, saying, we shouldn't bother with the new nuclear power station because it will only come online in the mid-2020s. That is totally the wrong approach. I must say, I think it's an approach that the previous government took all too often too, and I'm not going to shy away from this government taking long-term decisions that will improve our country's fortunes and make people in my constituency and across the country better off.
Nigel Huddleston, because the allegation that Dan made was that you have no alternative. Well, Paul, who has written in, has a question for you. With all the discussions regarding the heating allowance for pensioners, would the other parties, you are the representative of the Conservative Party today, would they reverse it?
Well, we would never have taken it away in the first place because we would prioritise pensioners over giving £10 billion away to your union mates in massive pay increases, or £8 billion on a national wealth fund, or £7 billion on GB Energy. So the decisions you have made have directly impacted and made pensioners worse off.
We knew...
In advance of the next election, I am in fear of what the financial state of the UK economy will be in 4 or 5 years' time when we announce our manifesto commitments. Then we can make the really detailed commitments. But this is something that the Labour Party own. This was their decision. And they were giving money away to union mates and taking it away from pensioners. You own that decision. I hope you're proud of it. I suspect your mailbag reflects not.
I think that people watching this programme now will think, actually, the Labour Party made the right decision to end the strikes in the NHS that were causing waiting lists to go up, that were causing people not to get the operations that they need, to have the improvements in the health that they deserve. They paid into the system and should have an NHS that works for them.
And the winter fuel payment,
that's the decision.
That was such a hard, unpopular... It defined you. It defined us very early days of a Labour government. It was cruel to set the taper so low, 12,500.
It was a really difficult decision. I think that the Chancellor had to make tough decisions last time when we came in, when we saw how difficult our inheritance was. But let's also be clear, the state pension has gone up, will go up by £470 in April.
Yeah,
we are fully committed to the triple lock over the course of this Parliament that will put up the state pension by, I think, approaching £2,000.
Has your pensions minister changed his mind?
The leader of the opposition said just the other day that she was interested in means testing things like the state pension.
The new pensions minister, Torsten Bell, used to run the Resolution Foundation. When he was working as an economist, he said that the triple lock was unsustainable, that the government should abandon it. Now he's in charge of the pensions. Has he changed his mind?
I think politicians should be allowed to change their mind, yes. And I think it's very clear that the whole government, is fully behind the triple lock. He may have said that five or so, 10 years ago. Kemi Badenoch said on the radio just last week that she wasn't supporting it.
No, she didn't, and you know she didn't. You say politicians change your mind. What you've done is made policy commitments before the election, changed your mind after. You deceived the British public. You lied to the British public.
The Shadow Chancellor said that the triple lock was unsustainable, didn't he?
You've changed your mind. What promises did you make? He was talking about in decades to come. You were talking about long term. You have deceived the British public. Nowhere in your election manifesto was anything on fuel or increasing national insurance. None of these things were there.
We said that we would grow the economy so that people can be better off, and we're focusing on that for the long term. We said we would invest...
Well, your focus is damaging the economy.
We said we would invest in our public services so that people could be seen again...
Money.
by their GPs, by their doctors,
I
that
agree with
teachers
that.
could receive
So
a pay rise, so we didn't have a
conditions
recruitment
then on
and
these pay
retention
increases?
problem. That's what we're focusing on. We said we get to clean power by 2030, so we can bring people's energy bills down.
GB Energy doesn't even produce energy. It's just £7 billion of spending.
I'm going to ask you, just at the end, you've only got about 20 seconds each, so we're not going to go into the sort of subject of assisted dying, because we'd need about 20 hours. But what Andy wants to know is, has the debate in the House of Commons, when you listen to the debate, do you ever change your mind in terms of how you finally vote by listening to the debate? It's a good question, Andy.
Yeah.
Nigel?
Yes, and I have, actually, because I've changed my mind on assisted dying about 5 or 6 times over the last few years, precisely because when you're presented with different evidence and really heartrending stories on both sides of the argument, I have changed my mind, but I did vote against it.
OK. Dan?
I haven't changed my mind sitting in the chamber yet, but I do find that actually it's quite enjoyable to be in the chamber, to hear different people's perspectives, to hear their speeches and the contributions that they bring. It's worth a look from time to time at some of the debates that are going on in Parliament, and I think particularly around important issues like assisted dying, where it's a free vote. I think that'll be a really important debate that we come to when it comes back to third reading.
That was really interesting. I enjoyed that. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, all of you, for sending in your questions. You've been watching or listening to PMQs Live with Gloria DePiero and Tom Harwood.
Now, of course, don't go anywhere, because I'm afraid you're stuck with me for another 2 hours. Me and Emily Carver, of course. That's Good Afternoon Britain, after your weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Another fairly glum day out there. A lot of cloud around. A few showers, but many places dry, and again on the chilly side. If anything, tomorrow is going to be a little colder. High pressure sitting out to the east. The winds coming in from the east, from the North Sea, so feeling particularly fresh on these North Sea coasts. A lot of clouds smothering the UK, but we've got some breaks in the cloud across western Scotland. Some sunshine here. A few showers coming in on that easterly breeze across southeast Scotland, eastern parts of England into the Midlands, but they're pretty well scattered, certainly nothing too heavy. The odd flake of snow over the Pennines, but chiefly rain and drizzle. Temperatures a touch below average for the time of year, and certainly feeling cold with that breeze on these North Sea coasts. That will continue as we go through this evening and overnight, as will the holes in the cloud across western Scotland. So here, temperatures pretty quickly getting back down below freezing. I think we'll see the cloud breaking up a little bit more as we go through the night as well. That will lead to a bit more in the way of frost overnight. Certainly as we go through this evening, though, it's just cloudy. A few more showers coming in, Lincolnshire, down across East Anglia, perhaps the odd one into Kent and across the Midlands, perhaps even as far as East Wales, but few and far between, and certainly fairly light, any of those showers that do come in. Through the night, not a great deal of change. As I mentioned, a few more breaks perhaps in the cloud, particularly across parts of Scotland, but also northwest England may see a few more breaks. So the blue on the chart there suggesting there will be a frost, certainly in rural parts. Towns and cities dropping to about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius. A colder feel, though, on Thursday. A few more breaks in the cloud. Better chance of seeing some sunny spells. Western parts of Wales, southwest England, northwest England, again, western Scotland also. Generally speaking, many central and eastern parts staying overcast. The odd light shower, but most places dry. The wind's a little lighter, but if anything, it will be a colder day tomorrow. Temperatures for many struggling at just 4 or 5 Celsius. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Newly released MI5 files reveal that Queen Elizabeth II was kept in the dark over the treachery of a senior courtier.
Yeah, for almost a decade. This is Sir Anthony Blunt, who played a double life, passing intelligence, the KGB, during World War II as a senior MI5 officer. But, remarkably, he was allowed to keep his position amid fears of a major scandal if the truth came out.
Well, now those files have been released by the National Archives, which includes the Queen's response to finding out a trusted member like Anthony Blunt was really a traitor.
Well, joining us now in the studio is GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Good to see you this morning, Cameron. This is astonishing.
Oh, absolutely. And this wasn't a little spy. This was Anthony Blunt was a full-blown spy. He passed to the Soviets the D-Day deception plans during the Second World War. He was working for MI5, but a double agent for the KGB as well.
The wrong plans.
He passed on the plans.
The wrong ones.
The wrong one in 1944. Yeah. Exactly. But he then got a job inside Buckingham Palace as one of the Queen's most trusted aides and courtiers, the surveyor of her